Have you ever stopped to think that maybe the biggest threat to your heart isn't just the stuff we always talk about, the fat, the sugar, the salt on the label, but something hidden in the very way our food is made? Today, we're going to look past the nutrition facts and uncover the pretty shocking story about ultra-processed foods are affecting our hearts.
I mean, if you think about it, the way we eat has completely changed. Just go back 50 years. Our kitchens, our parents' kitchens, were full of actual ingredients. Now, it's a different world. Those traditional diets, built on real whole foods, have been swamped by this tidal wave of convenient, factory-made products that, let's be honest, now fill up most of our grocery stores.
Look, we all get it. Junk food is bad for you. That's not news. But what if the problem is so much deeper than that? What if there's this hidden enemy, right there in plain sight on our shelves, that's really behind the terrifying rise in heart disease? Well, that's exactly the question we're digging into. So, to really get to the bottom of this, we've got to be super clear about what we're actually talking about. The term ultra-processed food, or UPF for short, means a whole lot more than just junk food. It's a different category altogether. Okay, so what is a UPF? Well, there's a formal definition, and it comes from this system called NOVA, which is just a way of classifying food by how processed it is. And we're not talking about, say, canned tomatoes or a loaf of fresh bread from a bakery. No. UPFs are full-on industrial creations. The dead giveaway? A super long ingredient list, packed with stuff you would never, ever find in your own kitchen. Things like emulsifiers, artificial flavors, and weird preservatives.
And this right here just makes it crystal clear. On one side, you've got corn, a real whole food straight from nature. On the other, you have corn chips. Sure, they started as corn, but they've been totally transformed with oils, weird powders, and additives into something else entirely. And these things are absolutely everywhere, right? Chips, sodas, most of the stuff in the frozen food aisle, even a lot of the bread you buy in a plastic bag. They are literally engineered to have a crazy long shelf life and, this is the key, to be hyper-palatable. That's a fancy way of saying they are designed to taste so good with the perfect mix of salt, fat, and sugar that they basically short-circuit your brain's I'm full signals and make you want to just keep eating.
Okay, and this is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. The damage these foods cause, it's not just about them being high in fat or sugar. That's definitely part of it for sure. But the latest science is showing a much deeper, much more sinister problem. It's the processing itself.
So all that industrial stuff, the intense heat, the high pressure, the chemical manipulation that changes the food's actual physical structure, plus that cocktail of additives creates what scientists are now calling a processing effect. And this effect sets off its own unique chain reaction of damage inside our bodies, completely separate from the basic nutritional info on the label.
So how does it actually work? Well, it's like a three-step domino effect that all starts in your gut. First, all those weird additives and the lack of fiber just wreck the good bacteria living in there. Second, that damage can weaken the wall of your intestine. You might have heard of it as a leaky gut. And here's the third and final blow. This allows these nasty inflammatory molecules to escape your gut and get into your bloodstream, which triggers this low-grade constant inflammation all over your body. It basically puts your heart and your blood vessels on a permanent state of high alert.
And man, this quote from a recent study just sums it up perfectly. It changes how you think about these foods, right? They're not just empty calories. They're active, biologically disruptive agents that are messing with our bodies at the cellular level.
And you can see the effect almost instantly. Just look at this chart. It shows what happens to these inflammatory markers in your blood right after you eat. After a healthy meal, sure, there's a little bump. But after a UPF meal, like a simple sausage sandwich, whoa. You see this massive 40% spike in what's called endotoxemia. That's that flood of inflammatory stuff. And that effect can last for hours.
Okay, so we've got all this biological disruption, all this inflammation. What does it actually do to your heart in the long run? Well, the data from huge population studies it's really clear. And honestly, it paints a pretty scary picture.
So let's kick things off in the UK. There's a massive study called the UK Biobank that followed over 60,000 people. And what they found was that the folks who ate the most of these ultra-processed foods had a 17% higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease.
And this isn't some isolated finding. Let's jump over to Australia. A study there followed almost 40,000 people for 2 decades and found something disturbingly similar. The group eating the most UPFs had a 19% higher risk of actually dying from heart-related issues. But the most jaw-dropping number comes from the US. A huge study found that people who were eating the most UPFs, we're talking about 9 servings a day, had a staggering 67% higher risk of a major cardiac event, like a heart attack or a stroke. Let that just sink in for a minute. 67%.
And here's what's so critical to understand. This isn't some all-or-nothing situation. That same U.S. study showed that the risk just keeps adding up. For every single extra daily serving of this stuff you eat, day in and day out, you increase your odds of a major cardiac event by over 5%. It's cumulative.
All right, I know, those numbers are pretty heavy. But here's the good news. Now we know. And knowing what the real threat is gives us the power to do something about it. So let's talk about some simple, powerful ways you can fight back and start protecting your heart right now. So, think of this as your personal toolkit. First, become an ingredient detective. A really great rule of thumb is the 5-ingredient rule. If it has more than 5 ingredients or stuff you can't pronounce, just put it back. Next, try to cook more at home. That way, you're in total control. In the grocery store, just try to shop the perimeter. That's where all the fresh stuff, the produce, the meat, the dairy, usually lives. And finally, make smart swaps. Grab some fruit or nuts instead of chips. Choose water over soda. Every single one of these small choices really does add up. And this all leads us to what is probably the single most important takeaway from all of this. For decades, the advice has been simple, right? Watch your calories, cut the fat. But what this new science is screaming at us is that that advice is just not enough anymore. A food can look okay on the nutrition label, but if its very nature has been altered in a factory, it can still be doing damage. We have to start asking a new question, not just what's in my food, but how is it made? And that leaves us with one last really big thought to chew on. The food we eat is being fundamentally changed, all the way down to the cellular level. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is, are our public health guidelines and even our own ideas about what it means to eat healthy changing fast enough to actually keep up?